This is part 2 in my short video series about the question, why does God exist? I want to get a little more personal in today's video. As I mentioned yesterday that I would do that in part 2. Something I've learned about myself. Part of being an Enneagram 5 means that if there's times where I feel threatened or unsafe for whatever reason, that I retreat to finding information, I guess. Retreat to the abstract, to the intellectual realm. It's also one of the ways I strive to control my environment. It's one of the ways I try to make my way in the world, I guess, to make life work for me. That sounds a little crude, but gathering information, analyzing it, trying to understand things. Granted, all humans do that, I think, but for whatever reason, for me, it's heightened, and these tendencies are common enough that there are 9 personality types listed in the Enneagram, along with subtypes. So, like, these type of dominant characteristics manifest in humans, like, one of my closest friends is an 8, and according to the Enneagram Institute, 8s and 5s tend to find each other. People that are 8s on the scale, generally speaking, are more instinctive in their decision making. And they find 5s a lot of times because 5s, we are very cerebral and we think through things a lot. Anyway, I think I was tired yesterday too, but I think there was a little bit of me hiding from this question, with my intellect and with the things I've researched. Now, does that mean what I had to say yesterday was unimportant? No, it doesn't mean that. But as I said, I want to get a little more personal today. So if you're to ask me empirically, does a relational, benevolent creator God exist? I would have to say I don't know. But I do think it's possible. I thought for many, many years that I had a personal relationship with such a God. Christianity and the Bible, even with all of their problems, tend to emphasize, at least in my experience, the more benevolent aspects of the character of Yahweh and Jesus. I think their benevolence as well as their justice get quite a bit of emphasis, at least in the traditions I grew up in. The two are often intertwined. Looking at it from the justice perspective, as I've talked about before, I was taught that all of us deserve death, and not only death, but eternal death, like in eternal separation from God, that we all deserve that. The human race deserves that. That God is just in pronouncing that verdict. in the court case of humanity, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I grew up believing that, or at least trying to believe that. And one of the most powerful aspects of my relationship with God, or at least what I perceived to be my relationship with God, was that when I confronted a way in which I had been wronging him, which usually meant disobeying one of his commands. Maybe it was mistreating other people, maybe it was failing to share the gospel, to tell other people about him, about how good he was. Maybe it was telling a lie, maybe it was struggles with addictive behavior, which has been a bane in my side for many, many years. It was a way of dealing with pain in my life. A lot of shame and guilt surrounding that. But the catharsis that would come after I would repent and, come back to God in prayer and say, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong. The catharsis that came from then, because of what I had been taught to believe and what I had tried to believe my whole life, the catharsis that came from believing that God had forgiven me, that he accepted me back in spite of what I had done, that he showed mercy to me. In a sense, I know this sounds drastic, but by not killing me, because we're told that's what we deserve. We actually deserve death. So, like any day God doesn't kill you for your disobedience. I know this sounds drastic, but this was at play in my psychology more days than I would want to admit. The fear that if I went too far, if I disobeyed too much for too long, or just didn't improve, that God would kill me. Now, I didn't believe they would send me to hell necessarily, because I thought I was a Christian. But I thought he might cut my life short, so that the good I could have done on earth would be cut short, because I just wasn't getting it done. I just wasn't, And I didn't believe I had to do that by myself. I believed I needed God's help to do that. But I kept falling short. So this, and I suspect the same is true for many, many Christians, particularly those who come from evangelical backgrounds, but probably I would say probably most Christians, is this teaching I think it's pretty core. It's pretty central to what one might call Orthodox Christianity. So it like the pain of feeling like you had failed God, the fear of what he might do, even though that might not necessarily be a fear of hell, although I think for many that is in there as well, at least in the background or under the surface. Or the fear that you might have to be disciplined, sort of like a parent would discipline a kid, that you might have to suffer some hardship in order to learn your lesson, so to speak. There are some verses that talk about that. In Hebrews, I believe it is, like the Lord chastens, or he disciplines, corrects those whom he loves. So if you were essentially, that was one of our explanations for hardship as a Christian. It's like, well, God is, especially if you had been failing frequently and some hardship came, you're like, oh, God is trying to humble me, he's trying to correct me, he's trying to correct my behavior, he's trying to teach me something. So there was this desire to learn a lesson, I guess, and like God is trying to bring me closer to himself. He's trying to make me more dependent upon him so that we'll be closer, we'll have a closer relationship, so that I won't be so arrogant and think that I can handle it myself. And as I've been trying to rebuild my worldview and my system, or at least testing out, if you will, new worldviews, new ideas, symbiosis is one that keeps coming back to me. Like the need to live in partnership, in harmony with all life, to value all life, and to realize how interdependent we all are. I've come to realize that whether God actually exists or not, whether this was all literally going on in my own mind, or I was actually interacting with God, there was a sense in which it trained me to be interdependent with other humans. Like, because even though his attributes are there's a sense in which Yahweh, Jesus, I mean, it gets even more explicit in Jesus, but like they're like heightened versions of humans in a sense, like obviously transcendent versions. Obviously Yahweh, or what you might call God the Father, is both above us and beside us. Like Jesus is kind of a picture of his immanence, of his presence here and now. Jesus is sort of the literal personification of God. And I think that there's a reason why, as humans, we're attracted to those types of gods. Is, it's not just that we're trying to create gods in our own image. It's that we want a God that we can relate to. And our science is confirming this. Like, our brains, are hardwired to relate to other humans. Obviously we're able to relate to animals as well, like other animals, other mammals, but Homo sapiens, human beings, fellow human beings, are those whom our brains are hardwired. One example of that is our ability to recognize faces. Like, each person's face is unique, as best scientists know. Even identical twins may have some minor variations in their facial structures, especially if they have different metabolisms. Maybe one of them's overweight, one of them's not. But just the facial structures we're born with, they're each a little bit unique. Obviously, we carry many of the genetic features that our parents gave to us, and yet our faces are unique. And as humans, we have the hardware to recognize human faces. Sometimes that misfires. An example may be, you look up in the clouds and all of a sudden you see a face. Like, you see what looks like two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. That's your brain. Your brain is so attuned to that structure, like in its attempts to recognize faces, that your brain will see faces places where there are no faces. Like, that's how attuned we are to other humans. I think our brains, I used to think there was some kind of psychic connection between me and my wife, because there were times, which I'm still open to something like that. There's so much we don't understand about the world. But I'm not kidding you when I say there are times where she will be thinking of something, and we'll find out, because she'll say something about it, we'll find out that I was literally thinking about the same thing. It's uncanny, and or I'll be able to anticipate what she says. Now that, I think, is, our brain stores all that information, and it has a predictive ability. We say, well, she's probably going to say this. There's a lot of data to back that up. That's kind of our predictive ability. But the coincidence that we would be thinking the same thing, like, it's really interesting. That kind of thing fascinates me. But so much about our physical brains and our nervous systems even are hardwired for to protect us, obviously, to protect us from other predators or other humans, as well as to facilitate cooperation with other humans, to build connections with other humans, to interact with other humans, to have relationships. And we need that. So it makes sense that even if we did invent the gods, it makes sense that many of us would invent gods that are like us. And part of that, I think, is we want a God we can relate to, that we can understand. And obviously the type of minds that we understand the best are human minds. So it makes sense that either that if the creator of the universe does actually want to communicate with us, that he would both be able to and would choose to communicate in a way that we can understand, communicate in a human fashion. Or from the flip side of, if every religion's concept of a god is just invented by us, there are good reasons why we would do that. I don't know good reasons, but there are reasons that make sense to me, at least. And honestly, at this point, I'm open to either possibility. I'm open to there being a God who exists. Now, the struggle, like if you propose a God who exists and you propose a God, and obviously we would want a God who actually cares about our interests, right? So the struggle with that then is having to answer, the age-old, well, not age-old, but like what's known popularly as the problem of evil. If we're going to propose that there is a God who is powerful enough and intelligent enough to create the universe, and that this God also cares about us, lowly humans, and wants what's best for us, why then does he allow us to harm each other? Why does he allow natural disasters? Questions like that. These are not easily answered, and religions have varying answers for these. You will find varying answers within the practitioners of a given religion. It's not an easy question to answer. And I think regardless of what, which personal God you want to follow or what idea, you have to reckon with, okay, well, if he does actually care about us, why does he allow all this pain? And so you have to reckon with that. You have to deal with that question. I do think that Christianity has attempted to answer that. The Bible, you see some of the writers wrestling with that and attempting to answer that. And I think, and I keep coming back to this, and I believe that it's true. I think what you see in the Bible is a very, very human, very flawed conception of the divine. And that's true regardless of whether such a being actually exists or not. To me now, the idea that this book is perfect, that it's a perfect portrait of the creator of the universe is, and I don't say this to belittle anybody or to belittle my former self either. I think it's kind of ridiculous, and I say that because I the more I've looked at that book with my eyes open, so to speak, at trying to look at it as an outsider, being open to the possibility that it's just a human book and not overcoming my fear of that possibility. The more I see the features that I would expect to see from a group of writings written by very flawed humans. I've told some people close to me that, look at the picture of God that's presented in the Bible, and I've said this, I hope that if such a being does exist, he's better than that he's better than us. The